The first time my daughter-in-law tried to erase me, she used the sun as her accomplice. She drove me out to the Anza-Borrego Trail, her sleek silver car kicking up a cloud of dust that settled on my sensible shoes like a fine layer of contempt. Her voice was a melody of practiced concern. "It's such a beautiful day, Elara," she'd said, her smile as bright and hard as the glare off the windshield. "A little fresh air will do you a world of good. Clear the cobwebs." She spoke of cobwebs often. It was her favorite metaphor for my memory, for my mind, for my very existence, which she viewed as a dusty corner in the house she intended to possess. I knew what she was doing. I had known for months, watching the slow, deliberate campaign she waged against me. It was in the way she moved my teacup just out of reach, then tutted when I couldn't find it. It was in the way she would tell my son, Liam, a story about my supposed confusion, her eyes wide with a sorrow so theatrical it was almost beautiful. I had become a character in a play she was writing, and she was setting the final scene. She stopped the car where the trail narrowed, a mere ribbon of dirt disappearing into the shimmering heat. "Let's just walk to that first bend, shall we?" she suggested, her hand alight, proprietary weight on my arm. Just to see the view, I let her guide me. I walked beside her, my steps slow and measured, a perfect performance of the frail, forgetful woman she needed me to be. The heat was a physical presence, pressing down on my shoulders. The air smelled of creosote and hot rock, a scent that was more familiar to me than the expensive French perfume Chloe wore. This was Daniel's land. My late husband. He had brought me here 50 years ago, his hand strong in mine, and taught me its secrets. He taught me how to read the sun, how to find water, how to recognize the whisper of the wind as a map. This desert was not a void to me. It was a library of memories. At the bend, Chloe stopped. She pointed to a distant, hazy peak. "Isn't that just breathtaking?" she murmured, but her eyes weren't on the mountain. They were on me, a quick, assessing glance. Clinical. She checked her watch, a thin gold band on her delicate wrist. "Oh, goodness," she gasped, the performance beginning. "I think I left my phone in the car with the window down. Silly me. You wait right here, Elara. Don't move. I'll be back in a flash." She squeezed my arm one last time, her polished nails digging in just enough to be a promise. Then she turned and walked away. I watched her go, her silhouette wavering in the heat. I heard the car door open and close. I heard the engine turn over, a low growl that grew fainter and fainter until it was swallowed by the immense, buzzing silence of the desert. She had left me. She had left me on a desert trail, alone, with a half-empty bottle of water and the full, crushing weight of her ambition. She thought the sun would confuse me. She thought the silence would frighten me. She believed I would wander off the path, a lost old woman, a tragic story for her to tell the paramedics, and, later, the lawyer who would help her get power of attorney. She underestimated me. That was her first mistake, and I decided, standing there with the sun beating down on my head, it would be her last. I was not lost. I was free. I waited for a full 30 minutes, sitting on a sun-warmed boulder, just to be certain. The silence was absolute, broken only by the scuttling of a lizard and the slow, rhythmic beat of my own heart. It was a steady beat. Strong. I took a small sip from the water bottle, rationing it out of habit, not necessity. I knew where the seeps were, hidden in the shaded crevices of the rocks, places Daniel had shown me decades ago. Places Chloe, in her haste and her arrogance, would never think to look for. The story she would tell was already forming in my mind. She would arrive home, frantic. She would call Liam, her voice breaking with crocodile tears. I just turned my back for a second. She was just gone. They would organize a search party. They would find me, they hoped, dehydrated and disoriented, proving her point. Proving that I was no longer capable. That I needed to be cared for, managed, put away. That my house, Daniel's house, the house I had filled with life and love and memory, was too much for me to handle. It was a good plan. Cunning, cruel, and meticulously staged. But it was built on a foundation of lies, and the biggest lie was me. I stood up, brushed the dust from my slacks, and turned my back on the trail she had abandoned me on. I took a different path, one that cut through a shallow arroyo, and followed the line of Palo Verde trees that marked a subterranean water source. It was a longer route, but it was shaded, and it would bring me out to the old highway, miles from where she had left the car. As I walked, my mind was not filled with fear, but with a cold, crystalline anger. It was the kind of anger that clarifies, that burns away the fog of grief and uncertainty. For a year, I had been mourning Daniel. For a year, I had allowed my world to shrink, had allowed Chloe to step into the void he left, believing her to be family. I had mistaken her calculation for kindness, her strategy for concern. No more. Every step on the hard-packed earth was a vow. Every rustle of a snake in the undergrowth was a reminder to be watchful. Every soaring hawk overhead was a lesson in perspective. She saw me as a creature to be caged. She had forgotten that I had spent a lifetime learning how to fly. It took me 2 hours to reach the highway. By then, the sun was beginning its slow descent, painting the sky in hues of orange and violet. A trucker, a kind man with a weathered face and eyes that had seen 1,000 lonely roads, pulled over. He listened to my story, a much-edited version, of course. Car trouble. A misunderstanding with my daughter-in-law. He nodded, his expression sympathetic. He didn't ask too many questions. He simply offered me a ride to the edge of town. He dropped me at a small diner, where I used the payphone to call a taxi. I did not call Liam. I did not call the police. I called a local service, a man I'd used for years to take me to doctor's appointments before Chloe had insisted on driving me everywhere. When the taxi pulled up to my house, the lights were on. Chloe's silver car was in the driveway, next to Liam's truck. I paid the driver, walked up my own stone path, and used my own key to open my own front door. They were in the living room. Liam was pacing, his face pale with genuine worry. Chloe was sitting on the sofa, a teacup rattling in its saucer, as she lifted it with a trembling hand. She was in the middle of a sentence, her voice thick with manufactured panic. And the police said we have to wait 24 hours, but Liam, I just have this terrible feeling. She saw me then. Her voice caught in her throat. The teacup clattered against the saucer. Her face, for one fleeting, unguarded moment, was a mask of pure shock. Liam rushed to me, wrapping me in his arms. Mom? My God, where have you been? Chloe said you wandered off. We were about to call the sheriff again. I leaned into my son, my tall, handsome, gullible son. I allowed myself to seem frail, exhausted. I patted his back gently. Oh, what a silly fuss, I murmured, my voice soft and airy. I just went for a little walk. I told you I would, Chloe. I looked at her over Liam's shoulder. Her composure was back, the mask of concern firmly in place, but I could see the frantic calculations behind her eyes. I saw the flicker of fear. She knew, in that moment, that something had gone wrong with her perfect plan. I had come back. And I had brought the truth home with me. I let them fuss. I allowed Liam to guide me to Daniel's favorite armchair, the one with the worn leather arms that held the shape of his hands. I allowed Chloe to press a cup of chamomile tea into my own hands, watching as she tried to steady her own. I noticed a small, hairline crack in the porcelain of the cup she gave me. It was from my grandmother's set, a delicate, irreplaceable piece. A fitting symbol, I thought, for the trust she had just shattered. She had probably cracked it herself in her haste to stage this scene of domestic worry. I must have just lost track of time, I said, my voice a whisper. I looked around the room, as if I was seeing it for the first time. It's all a bit fuzzy. This was the performance she expected. This was the role I would play, for now. I watched her relax. Just a fraction, a slight loosening of the tension in her shoulders. She had dodged a bullet. In her mind, my safe return was an inconvenience, not a catastrophe. She could still spin this. My confusion, my getting lost and somehow finding my way home by sheer luck, could still be used as evidence. She sat on the ottoman at my feet, her expression a careful blend of relief and deep concern. "Elara, you gave us such a fright," she said, her voice smooth as silk. "You can't do things like that." "We were imagining the worst." Liam knelt beside me, his brow furrowed. "Mom, what happened?" "Really, he was a good son. He loved me. But he was weak, and he was blinded by this woman's polished facade. He wanted to believe her because the alternative was too monstrous to contemplate." "Chloe is right, dear," I said, patting his hand. "My mind, it plays tricks on me sometimes." I saw the relief in his eyes, but it was mingled with a profound sadness. He was mourning a mother who wasn't gone yet. Chloe was a sculptor, and she was slowly, skillfully carving away his perception of me, replacing it with a portrait of incompetence. After they were satisfied I was settled, they retreated to the kitchen. They thought I couldn't hear them. They kept their voices low, but this old house has its own way of carrying secrets. The walls are thin by the pantry. I heard Chloe's hushed, urgent tones. "This is exactly what I was talking about, Liam. It's getting worse." She was gone for hours. She could have died out there. "We need to take action." "For her own good." Liam's reply was heavy with resignation. "I know. It's hard." "Of course it's hard, darling," she cooed. "But it's our responsibility. We have to protect her. And we have to protect everything your father built." "Everything your father built." "The house. The portfolio. The legacy. That was the prize. I was merely the obstacle." I sat in my chair, sipping the lukewarm tea from the cracked cup, and I listened. This was the beginning of my true work. Not of survival, but of reclamation. My first step was observation. I would become a ghost in my own home, a silent witness to their conspiracy. The next morning, I began. I feigned a deeper level of confusion. I would misplace my glasses, only to find them in the exact spot I'd left them. I would ask what day it was. I would trail off mid-sentence. Each small act of feigned frailty was a piece of camouflage, allowing me to move through the house unnoticed, my true intentions hidden. I started with the mail. Chloe had taken over managing the bills months ago, claiming it was too much for me. She would sort it at the kitchen island, creating two piles, one for me, filled with junk mail and letters from friends, and one for her, filled with the important envelopes, bank statements, investment reports, utility bills. She thought I didn't notice. Now, I made it my business to see what was in her pile. I would wake before dawn, before even the birds began to sing, and go down to the kitchen. The house would be still, shrouded in the grey pre-dawn light. I would put the kettle on, a quiet, domestic ritual. And while the water heated, I would carefully steam open the envelopes in her pile. My hands, which Chloe believed to be trembling and arthritic, were rock steady. I learned this skill from Daniel, who used to open letters from his estranged father this way, wanting to be prepared for the contents before he read them aloud to me. I would scan the documents, my mind sharp and clear. I photographed each page with the small, outdated smartphone Lily had insisted I get, a device Chloe assumed I could barely use to make a call. Then, I would meticulously reseal the envelopes and place them back exactly where she had left them. It didn't take long to find the first thread. A credit card statement, in her name, but tied to a joint account she held with Liam. There were charges from high-end boutiques I had never heard of, restaurants in the city I knew Liam hadn't been to because he was supposedly working late. And then I saw it. A recurring charge, once a month, for a room at a boutique hotel downtown. The same hotel, every time. The charge was disguised, coded as a corporate expense, but the name was there if you knew where to look. My heart didn't race. It grew cold and heavy in my chest. This was more than just a plan to steal my house. This was a deeper, more profound betrayal. I put the statement back in its envelope, my movements precise. I knew then that dismantling Chloe's world would not be enough. I had to save my son from it. The next phone call I made was the most important one. I waited until Chloe and Liam were out for the afternoon, a scheduled errand run that I knew was actually a meeting with a financial advisor Chloe had chosen. The house was quiet, filled with the gentle ticking of the grandfather clock in the hall, a sound that had measured out the years of my life. I went into Daniel's study, a room Chloe rarely entered. She called it musty, but to me it smelled of old books, pipe tobacco, and my husband's unwavering integrity. I sat in his large leather chair and picked up the phone. I dialed a number I knew by heart. The voice on the other end was gravelly and familiar. Arthur, it was Arthur Vance, Daniel's lawyer and his oldest friend. They had met in the army and had been inseparable ever since. Arthur was a man of few words, but his silence held more weight and wisdom than 1,000 of Chloe's carefully crafted sentences. "Elara," he said, his tone instantly warm, but with an undercurrent of caution. "Is everything all right?" "I'm fine, Arthur," I said, keeping my voice light. "I just have a few questions." About the estate, I could almost hear him sit up straighter in his chair. "Of course. What's on your mind?" I didn't tell him about the desert. I didn't tell him about the steamed open envelopes or the hotel charges. Not yet. It was too soon to lay all my cards on the table. The first rule of any engagement is to control the flow of information. "Daniel and I set up the trust years ago," I began. "I just want to be sure I understand all the particulars. Who are the trustees? What are the provisions for a situation where I might need assistance?" I used their language. I framed it as a question of my own potential frailty. It was the perfect cover. "Liam is the successor trustee, Elara, you know that," Arthur said gently. "But only upon your passing. While you are alive, and of sound mind, you and you alone are in control of the estate. Everything. The house, the investments. It's all yours." Daniel was very clear about that. He wanted you to be protected of sound mind. There it was. The battleground. "And what," I asked, my voice dropping slightly, "is the legal definition of sound mind?" There was a pause on the other end of the line. Arthur was sharp. He knew this wasn't an idle question. "That can be a complicated matter," he said slowly. "It usually requires medical evaluations, sometimes a court hearing." "Why are you asking, Elara? Is someone suggesting you're not?" "People have concerns," I said vaguely. "It's been a difficult year. I'll be there tomorrow at 10, he said, his voice firm, leaving no room for argument. "We'll go over every single page. Just you and me." When I hung up the phone, a wave of relief washed over me. I had an ally. A real one. Later that day, my granddaughter Lily came to visit. She was 7 years old, a whirlwind of bright energy and startling perception. Children see things adults have taught themselves to ignore. She ran past Chloe, who tried to intercept her with a saccharine smile, and launched herself into my arms. "Grandma," she cried, her hug fierce and unconditional. Chloe hovered nearby. "Careful, sweetie. Grandma is very fragile today." Lily pulled back and looked at me, her head tilted. She stared into my eyes for a long moment. "No, she's not," she said with the simple certainty of a child. "Her eyes are shiny today. Like when you have a secret," She pressed a folded piece of paper into my hand. "I made this for you." I unfolded it. It was a drawing of my house, rendered in bright crayon. There were two figures on the porch, a small one with a wild ponytail, and a taller one with silver hair. Me and Lily. And above the house, she had drawn a huge, brilliant yellow sun with rays stretching to every corner of the page. "It's so the dark can't get in," she explained matter-of-factly. Chloe let out a little laugh. "Oh, how sweet," but I saw the flicker of annoyance in her eyes. My bond with Lily was something she couldn't control, a language she didn't speak. I held the drawing carefully. It wasn't just a child's scribble. It was a talisman. A reminder of what I was fighting for. Not just a building of wood and stone, but the heart of a family. A place where a little girl could feel safe enough to draw a sun that kept the darkness at bay. That evening, after Lily had gone home, I tucked her drawing into the pages of a new journal I had bought. It was a simple, leather-bound book. On the first page, I wrote the date. Then I began to document everything. The conversation on the trail. The look on Chloe's face when I returned. The words I overheard from the kitchen. The details from the credit card statement. My hands did not shake as I wrote. My words were clear and precise. I was no longer a victim in her story. I was the author of my own. The heart of my house, and of my past, was Daniel's study. It was a sanctuary of memory, a place where his presence lingered like the faint, pleasant scent of old paper. A few days after my conversation with Arthur, I found myself drawn to it again. Chloe was out, having lunch with a friend, or so she said. Liam was at work. The house was mine. I ran my fingers along the spines of his books, history, philosophy, poetry. He was a man of deep thoughts and quiet conviction. His strength hadn't come from shouting, but from knowing. I sat at his desk, the worn leather cool against my arms. I opened the top drawer, the one that always stuck a little. Inside, beneath a stack of old maps, was a small, mahogany box. It wasn't locked. Daniel didn't believe in locking things away from me. Inside were his most treasured possessions. His father's watch. A medal from his service. And a stack of letters, tied with a faded blue ribbon. They were the letters I had written to him when he was stationed overseas, and the ones he had written back. I hadn't read them in years. It felt too painful after he was gone. But now, I felt a different kind of pull. I needed his voice, his clarity. I untied the ribbon, my fingers gentle. I picked up one of his letters, the paper thin and soft with age. His handwriting was strong and sure. I read about his days, the boredom and the fear, but mostly, I read about his love for me, and his dreams for our future, for the house we would build, for the family we would raise. His words were a balm, a reminder of the foundation upon which my life was built. A foundation of love, trust, and mutual respect. Everything Chloe was trying to demolish. Tucked at the very bottom of the box was a single, thick envelope, different from the others. My name was on the front, written in his familiar hand. And below it, 2 words, "For later." My breath caught. I had never seen it before. He must have put it there for me, a final message, a last piece of guidance. My hands trembled slightly as I opened it. Inside was a single, folded sheet of his heavy, cream-colored stationery. The letter was short, but every word was a shield. "My dearest Alara," it began. "If you are reading this, it means I am gone, and you are facing a storm without me. Do not be afraid. The world may see a gentle woman, but I have always known the steel in your spine. You are smarter than you let on, and stronger than anyone knows. Trust your instincts. They have never failed you. People, even those we love, can be swayed by fear and greed. They will try to tell you who you are. They will try to make you small. Do not let them. This house, this life we built, it is yours. Not as a possession, but as a testament. Guard it. Not with anger, but with wisdom. Your mind is your fortress. Your silence is your sword. I have left everything in your name for a reason. You are the keeper of our legacy. Remember who you are. Your loving husband, Daniel. I read the letter twice, then 3 times, the tears I had held back for so long finally blurring the ink. They were not tears of sorrow, but of profound, overwhelming gratitude. He had seen this coming. Not the specifics, not Chloe, but the possibility. He had known that my quiet nature could be mistaken for weakness. And he had left me this final gift, his unwavering faith in me. It was the catalyst. It was the permission I didn't know I needed to stop playing defense, and to start planning my attack. I folded the letter and placed it in the new journal, alongside Lily's drawing of the sun. They were my twin anchors, the wisdom of the past and the hope for the future. I turned to my journal and began to create a new section. I titled it The Plan. I divided it into columns: observation, evidence, action. Under observation, I documented every lie, every manipulative word, every subtle act of psychological warfare. Chloe telling Liam I'd forgotten to take my medication, when she had been the one to move it from the counter. Her finding my keys in the refrigerator, a place I would never put them. Under evidence, I listed the photocopies of the bank statements, the printouts of the hotel charges, the dates and times of her suspicious absences. I would need more. I would need to be thorough, meticulous. Under action, I started outlining the steps. The first was to fully understand my financial position. Arthur's visit would be critical. The second was to secure my home. The third, and most difficult, was to find a way to show Liam the truth, without destroying him in the process. My grief for Daniel transformed into a quiet, focused energy. The house no longer felt empty. It felt like a headquarters. Every object held meaning. The grandfather clock was my metronome, ticking down the time until I was ready. The windows were my observation posts. And Daniel's study was my war room. I was no longer a ghost in my own home. I was its sentinel. The weeks that followed were quiet, Cold War fought in the polite spaces of a family home. Chloe, emboldened by my apparent decline, escalated her campaign. Her suggestions became more frequent, her language more pointed. She would leave brochures on the coffee table, their glossy pages showing smiling, silver-haired seniors playing shuffleboard in pristine, sterile-looking facilities. Sunlight Gardens, one was called. The Golden Years Pavilion, read another. They looked like beautiful, comfortable prisons. Just something to think about, Elara, she would say, her voice dripping with false empathy. A place where you'd have professional care, around the clock. Friends your own age. You wouldn't have to worry about this big, drafty old house. She spoke of the house, as if it were a burden, a dilapidated relic that was weighing me down. She failed to understand that its drafts were the breath of its history, that every creak in the floorboards was a familiar footstep from the past. Liam, my poor, conflicted son, was her echo. He would sit with me in the evenings, his face etched with a worry that was both genuine and programmed. Mom, Chloe's right to be concerned, he'd say, avoiding my eyes. We just want what's best for you. He was caught in her web, struggling between his love for me and his desire for a peaceful life with his wife, a peace she had conditioned him to believe was only possible if I were removed from the equation. I continued to play my part. I would glance at the brochures with a vacant expression. Oh, that looks nice, dear, I'd murmur, before appearing to forget them moments later. But at night, in the solitude of Daniel's study, I analyzed them like military intelligence. I researched the facilities online. I read the fine print. I saw the exorbitant fees, the contracts designed to liquidate a person's assets with terrifying efficiency. It was all part of her financial plan. This was her endgame. The pressure mounted. A long, dreary rain set in, lasting for days, mirroring the oppressive atmosphere inside the house. The sky was a sheet of grey, and the windows wept with condensation. It was during this time that Chloe began to make mistakes. She grew overconfident. She started leaving her laptop open on the kitchen counter, assuming I had no interest or ability to use it. One afternoon, while she was in the garden, supposedly weeding my rose bushes, but actually taking a long, hushed phone call, I walked past it. The screen was open to her email. A thread was visible. The subject line was "The estate." My heart went still. I glanced out the window. She was at the far end of the garden, her back to the house. I had minutes, at most. My fingers, nimble from decades of sewing and gardening, flew across the trackpad. I didn't have her password to open specific documents, but I didn't need it. The email thread itself was enough. It was with a man named Marcus Thorne. I recognized the name from the hotel charges. The emails were a horrifying mix of business and intimacy. There were discussions about the market value of my property. "The sooner we can liquidate, the better," one of his messages read. "The market is at its peak." Chloe's replies were cool and calculating. She wrote of delays and complications, referring to me as the resident, not Alara. Not mother-in-law. The resident. As if I were a temporary tenant who had overstayed her welcome. And then, I saw the lines that confirmed everything. "I can't wait to be done with this, Mark," she had written. "Just you and me. A new start." Far away from here, his reply was even more damning. "Patience, my love. Think of the payout. Your husband will be sad for a while, but money heals all wounds. He'll thank you for it someday." I took out my phone and quickly, silently, photographed the entire screen. Every incriminating word. Then I closed the email program and moved the cursor to a benign shopping website, leaving the laptop exactly as I had found it. I retreated to the living room just as Chloe came back inside, wiping her hands on her jeans. "Those roses are a real mess, Alara," she said, a slight edge to her voice. "They need a firm hand to prune them back." I looked at her beautiful, dishonest face. "Yes," I said, my voice soft. "Some things do." She thought she was pruning a dying rose bush. She had no idea I was the gardener, and I was about to cut her out by the root. The rain finally broke that evening, and as the sun set, a magnificent double rainbow appeared in the sky, an arc of impossible color against the bruised clouds. It felt like a promise. The discovery of the emails with Marcus Thorne changed the nature of my fight. It was no longer just about protecting my home or my autonomy. It was now a rescue mission. I had to save my son from the architect of his own ruin. Chloe wasn't just deceiving me, she was systematically dismantling Liam's life, his finances, his family, all while whispering words of love and concern in his ear. The affair was the deepest cut of all. It revealed the absolute coldness of her heart. She wasn't just greedy, she was predatory. I spent the next few days in a state of heightened awareness, every sense sharp. I watched the way she touched Liam's arm, her smile never quite reaching her cold, assessing eyes. I listened to the false sincerity in her voice when she asked about his day. It was a masterful performance, and my son was her captive audience. My journal became my constant companion. The evidence section grew thicker. I had the financial statements, the hotel charges, the photographs of her emails. But I needed something more. Something undeniable. Something that would break the spell she had cast over Liam. Her overconfidence, once again, provided the opening. She had a second phone. A cheap, pay-as-you-go burner phone that she kept tucked away in the pocket of a winter coat in the back of the hall closet. I had noticed her disappearing into the closet for a few minutes at odd times, always emerging with a slightly flushed, secretive look. I had assumed she was hiding something, perhaps a bottle. The truth was far more calculated. My opportunity came on a Tuesday morning. Chloe announced she was going to a yoga class, followed by a long lunch with friends. Liam was at work. I had the house to myself for at least 4 hours. As soon as her car pulled out of the driveway, I went to the hall closet. The air inside smelled of mothballs and wool. I found the heavy tweed coat easily. My fingers brushed against the hard, rectangular shape in the pocket. I pulled it out. It was a simple, black phone. Unlocked. She hadn't even bothered with a passcode. She truly believed I was invisible, a piece of furniture in her way. I sat at the kitchen table, the phone in my hand, feeling alien and toxic. I took a deep breath and opened her messages. It was all there. A long, detailed thread with a contact simply labeled M. Marcus. The messages were explicit, a combination of romantic drivel and cold, hard strategy. They talked about their future together, about a condo in Florida they were planning to buy with the proceeds from my estate. They mocked Liam, calling him the workhorse, the golden goose. They laughed about his gullibility. He believes every word I say, Chloe had texted just 2 nights before. He's so desperate for a perfect little family he can't see the truth right in front of him. Each word was a small, sharp blade in my heart. Not for me, but for my son. For the humiliation that awaited him. I scrolled and scrolled, a sick feeling rising in my throat. I saw pictures they had exchanged. I saw plans for a trip they were taking next month, while Liam thought she was visiting her sister. The betrayal was absolute, breathtaking in its scope. I didn't delete anything. I simply connected the burner phone to her laptop, the one she thought I couldn't use, and using a simple data transfer cable I had ordered online weeks ago, I downloaded the entire message history. I saved the file to a small, encrypted USB drive, a piece of technology Arthur had given me during our last meeting. For your notes, he had said with a knowing look. I put the phone back in the coat pocket, ensuring it was exactly as I'd found it. I placed the coat back on its hanger. I left no trace. My work was forensic. Clinical. I felt no rage, only a profound, chilling resolve. This evidence was the key. It was not a weapon of revenge. It was a tool of liberation. It would be painful for Liam, a trial by fire, but it was the only way to burn away the lies and show him the truth. I held the small USB drive in the palm of my hand. It was no bigger than my thumb, but it contained the power to detonate her life, and to save my son's. The question was no longer what to do, but when, and how. It could not be a screaming match. It could not be a messy, chaotic confrontation. That would only give her the opportunity to twist it, to claim I was hysterical, senile, paranoid. No. It had to be done with dignity. With precision. It had to be a quiet, inescapable checkmate. With the final, devastating piece of evidence secured on the encrypted drive, the disparate threads of my plan began to weave together into a single, strong cord. The time for gathering intelligence was over. The time for action was approaching. My next meeting with Arthur was different. I didn't call him. I took a taxi to his downtown office, a stately building of granite and glass. I told Chloe I had a checkup with a doctor she didn't know, a small fiction to grant myself the freedom of a few hours. I walked into Arthur's office, not as a frightened old woman, but as a client with a clear objective. His office was like him, solid, orderly, and without pretense. Books lined the walls, not for show, but because they were read. He greeted me not with pity, but with respect. "Elara," he said, gesturing to the chair across from his large oak desk. "You look well, I feel well, Arthur," I replied, and it was the truth. For the first time in a year, I felt a sense of purpose that was sharper than grief. I didn't waste time with pleasantries. I opened my handbag and took out a simple manila folder. I placed it on his desk. Then, I placed the small USB drive beside it. I believe I have everything we need, I said calmly. For the next hour, I walked him through it all. I laid out the narrative, starting with the desert trail and ending with the messages on the burner phone. I presented it not as a wronged mother-in-law, but as a strategist laying out a campaign. I showed him the copies of the financial statements, the highlighted hotel charges, the printouts of the emails between Chloe and Marcus Thorne. Finally, I handed him the USB drive. This contains the entire message history from a second phone she keeps, I explained. It details both the affair and their plan to seize my assets after having me declared incompetent. Arthur listened without interruption, his expression grim, his gaze fixed on me. He didn't show shock or surprise, only a deepening resolve that mirrored my own. When I was finished, he was silent for a long moment, his steepled fingers resting on the folder. Daniel was right about you, he said, his voice quiet. The steel in your spine. He took the USB drive and inserted it into his computer. As he read through the messages, a muscle tightened in his jaw. He scrolled for a long time. When he finally looked up, his eyes were hard as flint. This is comprehensive, he said. It's brutal, but it's undeniable. What is it you want to do, Alara? We can take this to the authorities. Fraud, conspiracy. There are multiple criminal charges here. I shook my head. No, I said firmly. This isn't for the police. This is for my son. A public spectacle would destroy him. Chloe's humiliation would become his own. I don't want to ruin him, I want to save him. I want to give him a choice. An informed choice, based on the truth he has been prevented from seeing. Arthur nodded slowly, understanding. A private reckoning, exactly, I said. I will not have this fight in a courtroom. I will have it in my own living room. On my own terms, we spent the next hour devising the strategy. It would be simple, elegant, and final. Arthur would prepare a legal document for Chloe to sign, a full relinquishment of any and all claims to the estate, present or future, and an agreement to vacate the premises immediately. It would also include a non-disclosure clause, preventing her from ever speaking publicly about the family. In exchange, I would not pursue criminal charges. It was a clean, sharp cut. She'll sign it, Arthur said with certainty. Faced with this evidence, and the alternative of prison, she'll have no choice. As I prepared to leave, Arthur put a hand on my arm. You're a remarkable woman, Alara. I'm a mother, I replied. And a wife, still. I'm protecting my husband's legacy, and my son's future. It's the most natural thing in the world. I walked out of his office and back into the sunlight, feeling lighter than I had in years. The weight of the secret was lifting, replaced by the clarity of the impending resolution. When I returned home, I began to prepare. But I wasn't preparing for a battle. I was preparing for a ceremony. I spent the afternoon cleaning. I polished the silver until it gleamed. I washed the windows until the afternoon light streamed in, pure and unfiltered. I tidied every room, but it was more than just cleaning. It was a ritual of purification, of reclaiming my space. I was washing away the residue of her presence, her lies, her deceit. I was getting my house in order, in every sense of the word. That evening, as I sat in the quiet living room, the house felt different. It felt like mine again. It was ready. I was ready. The invitation was delivered verbally, casually, over a breakfast I had prepared. I made pancakes, Liam's favorite since he was a boy. Chloe watched me from across the table, a small, knowing smile on her face. She thought my sudden domesticity was a sign of resignation, a retreat into the simple, harmless tasks of an old woman. Liam, dear, I began, pouring him more coffee. I've been doing a lot of thinking. About the future. About this house. I saw Chloe's eyes light up. This was it. The moment she'd been waiting for. Liam looked up, his expression cautious. What about it, Mom? I think it's time we all sat down and had a proper talk, I said, my voice gentle. All three of us. To make some decisions. Why don't you and Chloe come for dinner on Saturday night? We can make it a special occasion. I'll cook. Chloe jumped in immediately, her voice bright and encouraging. Elara, that's a wonderful idea. Of course we will. We can finally get everything sorted out. She reached across the table and patted my hand. Her touch was cold. She believed this was her victory dinner. The final negotiation where the resident would graciously surrender her territory. The irony was a taste I had grown accustomed to. For the next few days, the atmosphere in the house was deceptively light. Chloe was almost cheerful, her mood buoyant with impending success. She was helpful, attentive, a perfect portrait of a loving daughter-in-law seeing her difficult charge finally come around. She didn't notice the quiet intensity of my preparations. She didn't see the symbolism in the tasks I undertook. I spent an afternoon in the garden, not just weeding, but carefully pruning Daniel's prize-winning roses. I cut away the dead wood, the tangled branches, the suckers that drained the life from the main stem. My hands were steady. My purpose was clear. On Saturday, I began cooking early. I decided to make roast chicken, the meal we always had for celebratory family dinners. The aroma filled the house, a scent of warmth, tradition, and normalcy. It was the perfect stage. Everything had to appear normal. The power of the reveal would be in its contrast to the placid surface I created. I set the dining room table with my best china, the wedding set Daniel and I had chosen together more than 50 years ago. Each plate was perfect, uncracked. I used the heavy silver cutlery and the crystal glasses that chimed when you touched them. I created a scene of perfect, unassailable domesticity. At 6 o'clock, Liam and Chloe came downstairs, dressed for the special occasion. Liam looked handsome in a crisp shirt, though his eyes were still clouded with a familiar anxiety. Chloe was radiant. She wore a simple, elegant black dress, her hair pulled back, her makeup flawless. She looked like a woman who had just closed a very successful deal. She carried a bottle of expensive champagne. To new beginnings, she said, handing it to me with a triumphant smile. Indeed, I replied, taking the bottle. To new beginnings. The dinner was a masterpiece of suspense, though only I knew it. I played the gracious hostess. I spoke of inconsequential things, the weather, a book I was reading, a memory from Liam's childhood. I kept the conversation light, smooth, a placid lake over a dark abyss. Chloe played her part beautifully, laughing at the right moments, guiding the conversation with subtle skill, always steering it back toward the future, toward simpler arrangements. Liam mostly listened, caught between his wife's confident optimism and my serene calm. The setting sun cast long, dramatic shadows across the dining room. The light faded from gold to deep indigo outside the freshly washed windows. We finished our meal. I served dessert, a simple apple crumble, Daniel's favorite. The grandfather clock in the hall chimed 9 times. The time had come. Well, Chloe said, setting down her fork with an air of finality. This has been lovely, Elara. Truly. Shall we move to the living room to discuss things? There's no need, I said, my voice quiet but clear in the still room. We can talk right here. I stood up and cleared our dessert plates. I moved with a deliberate, unhurried grace. When I returned from the kitchen, I was holding a single, elegant, dark blue folder. It was the one Arthur had prepared. I placed it in the center of the table, directly between the flickering candles. Chloe looked at the folder, her brow furrowed in confusion. Liam just looked at me, a question in his eyes. I sat down, folded my hands on the table before me, and looked at my son. The performance was over. I let the silence hang in the air for a moment, thick and heavy. Chloe's confident smile began to falter, replaced by a look of wary confusion. She glanced from the folder to my face, searching for a clue. She found none. My expression was calm, neutral, unreadable. "Mom?" Liam said, his voice tentative. "What is that?" "It's the future, Liam," I said softly, my gaze locked on his. "The one we need to discuss." I did not look at Chloe. I refused to engage her, to give her any power in this moment. My focus was entirely on my son. This was about him, for him. I slowly opened the folder. The documents inside were neatly organized, each in a protective plastic sleeve. The first document I slid across the polished wood of the table was a copy of the deed to the house. "This is the deed to your father's house," I said, my voice even. "As you know, he left it to me. It is in my name, and my name alone. I want you to be clear on that." I let him look at it. Then, I slid out the next document, a summary of the estate's liquid assets, prepared by Arthur. I placed it beside the deed. "And this is a summary of the assets your father and I built over 50 years of hard work. It is also, as per the trust, entirely under my control." Chloe shifted in her chair, a flicker of impatience in her eyes. "Elara, we know all this. The point is that it's becoming too much for you to manage." Her voice trailed off, as I slid the next set of papers in front of Liam. They were the credit card statements, with the charges for the high-end boutiques, and most notably, the monthly charges for the boutique hotel, all neatly highlighted in yellow. "And this," I said, my voice still quiet, "is how those assets have been managed for the past 6 months." Liam picked up the statements. I watched his eyes scan the pages. I saw the flicker of confusion, the dawning recognition of names and places that didn't fit his life. "I don't understand," he mumbled, looking at Chloe. "These dates." I was working. Chloe's face had gone pale. "It's for the business, darling," she said quickly, her voice a little too high. "Corporate entertaining." "You know how it is." "No," I said simply. I reached into the folder and pulled out the printed copies of her emails with Marcus Thorne. I laid them on the table. "I don't think he does know." Liam's gaze dropped to the emails. He read the subject line, the estate. He read the words liquidate, the resident, complication. He read the cold, calculating plans for my future and for their own. The blood drained from his face. He looked up at Chloe, his expression one of pure, wounded disbelief. "Chloe, what is this?" Her mask finally cracked. Fear, raw and ugly, flashed in her eyes. "It's not what it looks like, Liam. Your mother is confused. She's taking things out of context." Her voice was unraveling, the smooth silk replaced by coarse, desperate thread. I said nothing. I let her words hang in the air, hollow and false. Then, I played my final card. I took the small, encrypted USB drive from the folder and placed it on the table. It made a small, definitive click against the wood. "And this," I said, looking directly at Liam, my heart aching for the pain I was about to cause him, "is the truth. It's the full record of your wife's conversations with her lover, Marcus Thorne. It contains their plans to sell this house after putting me in a facility. It contains their opinion of you, my son. And it contains all the things she says to him when she thinks no one is listening." Chloe stared at the USB drive, as if it were a scorpion. She stood up so quickly her chair scraped loudly against the floor. "This is insane. You are a vindictive, crazy old woman. Liam, don't listen to her." But Liam wasn't looking at her. He was looking at me. And in his eyes, I saw the spell breaking. I saw the layers of deception falling away, replaced by a slow, dawning horror. He finally saw her. Not the charming, capable woman he thought he knew, but the stranger who had been sitting at his table. I pushed one last document across the table. It was the legal agreement Arthur had prepared. "You have 2 choices, Chloe," I said, my voice devoid of emotion. You can sign this document, agreeing to walk away with nothing but your personal belongings, and I will not press criminal charges for fraud. Or I can give this USB drive to the police. The choice is yours. She stared at me, her face a contortion of rage and defeat. The silence in the room was absolute, broken only by the steady, relentless ticking of the grandfather clock in the hall. The aftermath was not loud. There was no screaming, no shattering plates. The loudest sound was the scratch of a pen on paper. Chloe, her face pale and tight, stood at the dining room table and signed the document Arthur had prepared. She didn't look at me. She didn't look at Liam. She signed her name with a sharp, angry stroke, then threw the pen down on the table. It rolled and came to a stop next to a crystal wine glass. She turned without a word and walked out of the dining room. A few minutes later, we heard her footsteps on the stairs, then the sound of drawers opening and closing, the sharp snap of a suitcase latch. Liam sat frozen in his chair, staring at the pile of documents on the table. He looked like a man who had survived a shipwreck, dazed and disoriented on an unfamiliar shore. He hadn't said a word since I presented the final piece of evidence. He just sat there, the truth settling around him like rubble. I gave him time. I quietly gathered the papers, the evidence of a war that was now over, and put them back in the folder. I blew out the candles, plunging the room into the soft, dim light from the hall. The house was quiet again, but this was a different kind of quiet. It was the silence of a fever that has broken. After what felt like an eternity, Liam finally looked at me. His eyes were filled with a profound and terrible pain, but beneath it, there was a glimmer of clarity. All this time, he whispered, his voice hoarse. He couldn't finish the sentence. I know, I said gently. I know it hurts. He buried his face in his hands, his shoulders shaking. I went to him and placed a hand on his back. I didn't offer empty platitudes or say, I told you so, I just stood with him in his grief, a silent, steady presence. He was not just mourning the end of his marriage. He was mourning the reality he thought he had, and he was grappling with the shame of his own blindness. We stayed like that for a long time. Eventually, we heard Chloe come down the stairs, her suitcases bumping against the wall. She walked to the front door without looking into the dining room. The door opened, and then it closed with a soft, final click. And she was gone. The house sighed around us, as if it, too, could finally breathe again. The healing would be a long, slow process. Liam and I had to rebuild our own trust, brick by painful brick. There were difficult conversations in the days and weeks that followed. He apologized, over and over, his shame a heavy cloak. I listened, and I forgave him. He was not malicious, only manipulated. He had made a mistake, but he was my son. My love for him was deeper than his error. Slowly, the light began to return to our home. Lily started visiting more often, her bright presence a powerful antidote to the lingering shadows. She and I would spend afternoons in the garden, her small hands helping me tend to the roses. We would bake cookies in the kitchen, filling the house with the scent of sugar and butter. Liam started coming home from work on time. We would eat dinner together, not in the formal dining room, but at the small table in the kitchen, talking about our days. We were learning to be a family again, a smaller, quieter one, but one built on honesty. One sunny afternoon, months later, I was sitting in my armchair in the living room, a book open in my lap. The windows were open, and a gentle breeze carried the scent of blooming jasmine. Lily was on the floor, working on a new drawing. Liam walked in and handed me a cup of tea, this one in a solid, sturdy mug. He sat on the ottoman, the same place Chloe used to sit, but his presence was different. It was calm. Grounded. I was thinking about Dad today, he said quietly. He would have been proud of you, Mom. You were so strong. I smiled, a genuine smile that reached my eyes. Your father knew my strength long before I had to use it, I said. He just left me a reminder. I looked around the room, at the sunlight slanting across the floor, at my granddaughter humming as she drew, at my son, finally seeing clearly. The house was at peace. I was at peace. It was a peace I had fought for, not with fists or fury, but with patience, with silence, and with the undeniable power of the truth. Maybe you're listening to this, and you feel invisible. Maybe someone in your life is trying to write your story for you, trying to convince you that you are smaller, weaker, or more confused than you know yourself to be. They will use your love against you. They will use your quiet nature as proof of your weakness. They will try to put you in a box, label you, and file you away. Do not let them. Your mind is your fortress. Your silence can be your sword. Pay attention. Gather your evidence. Trust your instincts. You are the keeper of your own house, the author of your own story. You are stronger than they want you to believe. Remember who you are. And when the time is right, show them. Not with anger, but with the calm, unshakable clarity of the truth.